Everyone, thank you for joining us for this webinar presented by Severalnines. Thanks for participating today. The topic is on 9 DevOps tips for going into production with Galera Cluster. So thanks for joining us for that today. I'm joined by my colleague Johan Andersson. Hello, Johan.
Hi, guys. How are you doing?
And we're going to spend the next hour discussing this topic of going in production with Galera Cluster and just give you some key tips on what to look out for and what to think about before going into production with that clustering technology. Just before we get started, I wanted to walk you through some of the logistics. So we are recording this session, so you'll be able to view a replay of it and also watch the slides if you want after this is recorded, and we will communicate this online to you. You can also ask questions throughout the webinar by using the questions box or the chat box in your control panel. And you can also just send me an email if you like at jj@severalnines.com. If you have any questions on anything that we haven't covered today, feel free to drop me an email and we'll look after you that way. So that's jj@severalnines.com. Severalnines, if you're joining us for the first time today on one of our webinars, we are a company that develops tools to operate and manage database clusters, both for SQL and for NoSQL databases. And the way we do this is via one product really called Cluster Control, which helps you to deploy, monitor, but also manage and scale database clusters. And this is really our approach to look at the cluster first and then look at what's going on inside the cluster. So you want to be able to deploy and monitor, of course, and those are features that you can access via a community edition of Cluster Control, which is free. And then there are management and scaling functionalities and features that you can access via an enterprise version of the product. And we're going to cover some of this also during the session here, because the tool helps you do some of the things that we want to talk you through today. And on the next slide, I just want to show you the databases that we support. So as I said, it's SQL and NoSQLs, and on the SQL side, we have the three main MySQL variations, MariaDB, and then you've got Percona ExtraDB, of course, and NDB, and then there's the Galera cluster from Codership, who are the developers, original developers of Galera, and then of course MySQL replication. And a new feature is that you can also manage standalone MySQL and MariaDB instances. And as I said, we also support NoSQL, and on that front, it's really MongoDB and TokuMX, which is a fork of MongoDB provided by a company called TokuTech. And with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Johan, to start with today's session.
Thank you very much, JJ. Okay, hi guys again, and very welcome. And I want to talk to you about a few of the things that I think is worth considering if you're going into production, or even if you are already in production. Actually, then I think what I will discuss here is a few could be good hints and things that could be good to know regarding having a Galera cluster in production. And what we will do is that we will start off with a very basic, 101 sanity check, and then we'll talk about some of the operating system things that we can set and tune, and then we'll go into more deep stuff like Galera recovery, schema changes, and eventually we will round it up with talking about how we can protect our clusters if a disaster would happen. And there are some other topics here. Some of the topics we will go, as I said, a little bit deeper into, and some will be a little bit lighter. And for the lighter ones, we often have more information on those topics online, and we'll try to provide you links there to where you can read more about those topics. Right. So the first thing that I think what you must make sure regarding your Galera setup is that you, at all tables that you're using are either InnoDB or ExtraDB tables. Although Galera actually supports replication of MyISAM tables, well, that feature is actually considered experimental still. So if you have MyISAM tables, I really strongly recommend that you move them into InnoDB. And also, in some applications, if you're migrating an existing application into Galera Cluster, well, some MyISAM tables that you have already may be using full text indexes. But that's not really a problem any longer, because InnoDB from MySQL 5.6 supports actually full text indexes. Another thing that you should consider is that all tables should have a primary key. And if no primary key is defined, you can easily add one to your tables. But we really recommend that because otherwise we have seen issues basically where a simple delete could cause full table scans to locate the record that is going to delete, or an update that if you're going to update a one particular record, you don't have a primary key or things like that, then again a full table or index scan could be necessary, and that's just causing well, a lot of extra work in that case for the Galera node. Another thing that is also good to make sure is that you don't have any unbound queries. And by that, I mean queries that are updating basically every record in the table. That there is no limit onto these queries, how many records that they can update or even delete. And there is also internally built into Galera a bit of protection against this. You can actually configure how many records or the size of the size of the records that can be manipulated in one transaction. But still, the best thing to do is to really limit huge updates by basically the limit clause or a where clause. So you do updates and deletes of smaller batches. And then also there will be in the future better support for bigger queries and huge queries for Galera. But currently recommend that, as I said, that you keep updates and deletes somewhat in bounds, so you do them in chunks instead of huge operations, huge transactions. Then just one thing here when it comes to recovery, just a small thing here about recovery, and normally, once in a while a node will fail, or you add a node, or you put a node down to maintenance. In that case, the joining node that wants to come back into the cluster again needs to synchronize, right? And there are different synchronization methods, or SST methods as they're called, inside Galera. And we really recommend that you use extra backup v2 for this. It's the most modern and most sophisticated SST, which is a state transfer method to transfer the state from one node to another. I really recommend that one. If you're in a wide area network environment, well, if you are seeing kind of messages like this, that one of the nodes is spitting out, turning message relay, requesting on, etc., reconnecting, and if you see these messages repeatedly, it's most likely that you have some problems with your network environment. And in that case, I think it's good to increase timeouts, because what these messages really means is that the Galera nodes are kind of losing contact with each other. One Galera node is not responding fast enough to keep alive messages and so on, causing it to time out. The other nodes will then say, no, it's a non-live pair, so let's disregard that node, and that's can cause some friction in the cluster. So we then recommend that you bump up some timeouts, and the timeouts that I've listed here are quite quite a standard template for wide area network configurations. You might, and I think they are working fine up to latencies, with about 80 milliseconds. But if you have more, you might need to increase, for example, suspect timeout, and keep alive periods, and things like that, to have a good network environment, basically, for your Galera cluster. And really, if you if you have a network, and if you're running over a wide area network and it's fairly stable and have a ping time around 10 to 15 milliseconds, then I think you can actually start off with leaving out these wide area network settings here, and just go with the default values, and that is basically to set nothing then in the VSREP provider options. Then, when it comes to use what version that we should use on MySQL, I think there is really no longer any reason to use any 5.5 based MySQL variant, especially if you're setting up a new environment for testing out, or that you're planning for Galera. Then I would really strongly recommend that you use MySQL 5.6 or MariaDB 10.x. Those versions are so much better. There are so many bug fixes and performance improvements to handle better write-intensive workload, and many optimizations in the query optimizer that makes it querying the database faster. And it also makes the upgrade path later on easier to move to 5.7. Then for the Galera library, then recommend that you are using the 3.x series, and that you try to move away from the 2.x series if you're using that. The 3.x series is the branch where things are happening, basically. The most changes and fixes and new features are going in.